Thank you. My name is Morgan Craven. I'm the National Director of Policy Advocacy and Community Engagement at IDRA, and I'm testifying against HB 28. We believe that there are many problems with HB 28 and the underlying law, HB 3979, and I was planning to list those out, but instead I want to focus on a point that we keep hearing again and again in defense of this bill and the underlying law. We've heard that there are concerns that a truthful account of history and current events might be hurtful for some students or cause some anxiety or blame. And Lord knows we don't want any student to feel hurt in school, or any adult for that matter, to feel hurt about what happens in schools. But I would point out that there are two problems with the idea that HB 28 and the underlying law help to solve that issue. First, the most hurtful thing we can do is deny students the opportunity to fully explore history, current events, and the provable truths of our complex history. Censorship is hurtful. Denying the obvious is hurtful. Gaslighting students by trying to convince them that what is there is not is hurtful. Instead, talking about historical complexities, allowing heroic people to also be flawed, examining the underpinnings of progress and setbacks, acknowledging the many stories that are part of our collective narrative, discussing the persistent and current impacts of a long history of racism in this country, these are the things that will ultimately protect students, because these discussions will allow them to become engaged and thoughtful people who deeply and passionately believe that they can participate in our society in the way that we hope it will one day be. Second, if we truly don't want to hurt students or target them, it would help to stop routinely denying and de-emphasizing the hurt that Black students and Latino students and Indigenous students and Asian students and girls and LGBTQ students and other historically marginalized groups have long felt in their schools. If we're worried about all students and the hurt they feel, or the anxiety they may feel, we wouldn't shut down conversations in classrooms or deny them credit for their work. Instead, we would focus on policies that have a real positive impact on all students, like removing police from schools, or ending punitive discipline practices, or expanding access to coursework that prepares all students for college should they choose to go. We would expand ethnic studies courses, invest in emergent bilingual students, and adopt culturally sustaining practices in schools. It is disingenuous to say that you are against racial inequities, but promote a bill that denies racial equities and not full-throatedly support policies that would address racial inequity in schools. HB 28 and the underlying law hurt all students. Anyone with a very basic understanding of history knows that in no context, in no place in the world, at no point in time, has controlling thought and suppressing speech helped anyone, and it won't help here. We are better and stronger when we grapple with the truth, promote free speech and ideas, and trust teachers and students to have the conversations that prepare them for this world. We have HB 3979 as the law for now, and we urge you to not double down on that bad policy and expand its prohibitions. We urge you to reject HB 28. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Craven. Any questions? I think Representative Tallarico has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Craven, for being here. And I just wanted to highlight a point that you made, which is there's a difference between feeling hurt in the classroom or hurting a student versus a student feeling discomfort, because I think we all recognize that discomfort is a critical part of learning and growing. And students should be exposed to new information, to new points of view, to new perspectives, if we expect them to learn and grow. It's funny to me that some of the folks in our political discourse that criticize safe spaces are the ones that don't want students to feel discomfort in the classroom. Talk a little bit about it as someone who works in education and education policy, about the importance of trusting our teachers as professionals, just how we're professionals up here on this dais, folks in the audience have their own professions. Being an educator is an art as much as it is a science, and creating a culture within your classroom of trust and of honesty where kids feel okay with discomfort and still feel protected and still feel loved and cared for. Why does this bill disrupt or how does this bill micromanage teachers in doing the job we have asked them to do and the job they're trained to do?
I think that it disrupts that in kind of very clear and obvious ways if you just look at the text of the bill. So saying that they can't discuss a list of topics or that they have to control the way that they are choosing to explore current events or history, or saying that they have to deny things that are obviously true, like the fact that we have systemic discrimination in this country, and we have to deal with that. That controls what teachers are able to do in their classrooms. But I think one of the most dangerous parts of the underlying law in this bill is the chilling effect, and we've heard from witnesses about that, the chilling effect it will have on teachers in schools and what they feel they can discuss. So the fear that they feel because this law, the underlying law in this bill are so broad and so vague and so confusing that the 1,200 school districts and charter schools in this state and the teachers within them are going to have to figure out what that looks like for them. So while the prohibitions, I think, point to the things that you can't discuss, and even that's a little bit vague, I think the fear that we're hearing a lot of teachers feel about what they can and cannot say and who's going to get mad at that and what's going to happen to them and fear for their jobs is really, really significant. And I would say a practical issue that we're concerned about that was pointed out earlier is just what does this do for the teacher pipeline for recruiting and retaining teachers, not just for the courses that we know where there is where we desperately need teachers, but also diversity of teachers. We know from plenty of research that when students are exposed to diverse teachers, when students have Black teachers and Latinos teachers, they fare much better in school, white students included. And so when we create a situation where we are scaring teachers, and I have heard that perfectly wonderful qualified teachers do not want to come to Texas anymore. Teachers of color do not want to come to Texas and teach in Texas schools. That's really dangerous for our students.
Well, and I have just a fundamental aversion to government micromanaging what a teacher teaches in the classroom. We have educational standards. School districts and school boards are empowered to implement policy at the local level, because local communities know what's best for their kids better than the state government does or the federal government does, right? And at the end of the day, that's exactly what this bill is trying to do. Because the concerns that I've heard raised by witnesses, by the bill author, which I think are authentic, I'm not doubting anyone's sincerity, the concerns about bullying kids, a teacher bullying a kid, that's already not allowed, right? A teacher would be fired on the spot and should be fired on the spot for bullying a child, right? Discriminating against a child because of their sex, their gender, their race, their ethnicity, that is also a fireable offense, right? So what we're concerned about is already not allowed. My concern is when we bleed over into curriculum, right, and bleed over into academics and say that we can't talk about certain things in a lesson, that we can't share certain content with our students. That's where this becomes dangerous. The concerns that we're going to hurt students, bully students, discriminate against students, we all agree, and every school district in Texas already would ensure that a teacher is fired because of that. So I don't want to use the concern about protecting students as a mask for the real agenda here, which I think is trying to shut down discussions of race that make people uncomfortable. And ultimately, we're never going to reach the place we all want to reach if we're shutting down those discussions, because we need them now more than ever. Thank you, Ms. Craven, for all the work you do.
Thank you.